Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Ba'd a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. MashaAllah, the the whole point of this evening, inshallah, we are in the process of working out like these basic, fiqh classes and mashallah, so that way we have a system and everything set up. So as brothers are coming in, or people who want to, they've never formally covered salat, tahara, etc. As far as the fiqh is concerned, mashallah, we're in the process of getting that arranged for everybody, inshallah, on a repetitive basis. So it'll be a complete system. But the time that we are going to be spending and how we're going to be allocating and parts of our programming during 2022 is going to be dealing with issues like this, issues that are a little bit more require a little bit more detail. It's not so much black and white, like ABC 1, 2, 3. And this is one of those. This topic here regarding consistency in the salat. This is one of the kind of arguably one of the biggest problems and one of the largest issues that Muslims are consistently bringing in front of brothers like myself, and you can hear the pain in people's voices, and you can hear you can see the frustration on them, the confusion. Like, how do I handle this situation? Because in their heads, what's happening is there's an understanding that salat is important, but now in terms of the consistency, it's hit or miss, right? So what we want to try to do this evening, inshallah, is not entirely, but let's at least begin this conversation regarding what is the actual essence of the salah itself. What's the whole point of the salah? And we will read some ayat of Quran, inshallah, and then some hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then we'll go from there, inshallah. And I will reference those same ayat of Quran and hadith as we continue on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Ankabut, this is Surah 29, ayah number 45. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Utlu ma uhiya ilayka min al-kitabi wa aqimi as-salah. Inna as-salata tanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Wa li dhikrullahi akbar. Wallahu ya'lamu ma tasna'un." Then in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرُكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. So in the first ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, and indirectly to us as well, recite what has been the revelation, what has been revealed to you from the book, and establish the salah. Undoubtedly, the salat, it prohibits, right, from fahsha, vulgarity. What munkar? Munkar is going to be any brothers, the Slack brothers, please do not send me any Slack messages right now, please. The notifications are on. So the anil fahsha, so vulgarity and munkar. Munkar is going to be ma'ruf. Munkar is the opposite of ma'ruf, right? Amr bil ma'ruf wa nahyu anil munkar. So ma'ruf is now what we know and understand to be khair from the Quran and the Sunnah. Munkar is going to be what is outside of that. It is what is, there's a dislike that is associated with that. Why? Because it is outside of that parameters of what is going to bring about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is like a general understanding of everything that is outside of what is permissible, outside of what we should be doing. We're going to understand as munkar. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. And this part right here, and this is the reason why I brought these two ayat, you will recognize these tomorrow, because this is technically this is Laylatul Jumu'ah. This is the night of Jumu'ah. It's Thursday night. So this is the Laylatul Jumu'ah. So Jumu'ah has technically already started. It's just the night. Night comes first. It's the lunar calendar. Night comes first, and then comes the day. So you'll recognize this. A lot of the khatibs, this is at that very tail end in the second khutbah. وَلِذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ مَا تَصْنَعُونَ. So undoubtedly, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest. This remembrance of Allah and the mentioning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is akbar. Wallahu, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah knows what you are literally here, what you are manufacturing. What are you producing? right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about this. And then in the next ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah, فَذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرُكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Again, you'll recognize this at the tail end of the second khutbah, after the Khadij sits down and he stands up to begin the second part. This is normally at the very end before, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. So both of these, now, mashallah, I figured it was apropos appropriate, since this is Laylatul to Jumu'ah, and it also here, it's directly related to what? Salah. Both of these, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning in the salah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Mu'minun, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. So these believers, that they're already successful. Who are they though? الَّذِينَ هُمْ فِي صَلَاتِهِمْ خَاشِعُونَ. They are those that in their salah, that they have this khushu'. They're khashia'. And here this means that now that this is an internal aspect. So this has to do with now internally and externally, that you have to be in a state of peace, in a state of sukoon, right? There should be a sense of tranquility which is associated with the salat, externally and internally. And in terms of the externally, this is there are multiple narrations where Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam and or the Sahaba, that they would their eyes would look up. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was always looking up for Jibreel alayhi salam, because sometimes Jibreel alayhi salam would descend during the salat with ayat, with revelation, wahi from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then, still unfortunately we see it today, people will be in salat and they're in salat, but their eyes are looking all over the place, right? So salat is now demanding something from us, and this is one of the things that we want to talk about this evening, inshallah, bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Then عن أبي هريرة رضي الله تعالى عنه قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول إن أول ما يحاسب به العبد يوم القيامة من عمله صلاته فإن صلحت فقد أفلح وأنجح وإن فسدت فقد خاب وخسر فإن انتقص فإن انتقص this is wrong. انتقص من فريضته شيء قال رب عز وجل انظروا هل لعبدي من تطوع فيكمل بها من تقص من الفريضة ثم يكون سائر عمله على ذلك أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. So we have this narration from Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala and the Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, I heard the Messenger of Allah saying that undoubtedly the first of what will be reckoned or taken into account, right, doing our hisab on Yawm al-Qiyamah from the slave of Allah, will be his from amongst his actions will be his salah. And if his salah is if it is correct, then already he's succeeded, and now he is the salvation has been acquired, has been achieved. And if it is fasadat, meaning if there is corruption, if it is corrupt. So here because a lot of times what happens is that this hadith is mentioning now in terms of the adad, or the actual number of the salah. So did you make Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha? So just about the sheer number, 5 times a day. But here, fasadat is actually indicating that there is a contaminant, that there is a corruption here. فَإِن fasadat فَقَدْ خَابَ. Khaba wa khasira. Khasira is to be in loss. But khaba, this is really important here, because khaba indicates when a person thinks that they've won. So imagine you thought that you won, like I succeeded, I did it, I'm victorious. But then when the results come in, you find out that you lost. And if you've ever taken a test or exam or anything like that and thought like, I did really well on that test, I did excellent on that test, I'm like positive I got like a at bare minimum I got a B, and then you get the test back and it's like a D, it's a F, it's like, what happened, right? That's khaba. You're thinking one thing, but the actual result turns out to be something else. Okay, so again, it's indicating that there's something more here than just the sheer number itself. And if there is any deficiency amongst the faridah, amongst what is fard, meaning Fajr, Dhuhr, Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha, if there's any deficiency in it. Now, this could be in terms of the adad, in terms of the number, and also in terms of the actual, not the quantity, but the quality of the salah itself. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, yani to the malaika, unzuru, look, does my abd, does my slave, from amongst the tatawwu'in, min tatawwu'in, tatawwa is nawafil. So out of the, outside of what is farad, has my abd, has he performed or has she performed extra salawat? Has he performed nafil, whether it's, mashallah, qiyamul layl, getting up in the night. For us, mashallah, the 12 rakats of our sunnah, so the 2 before fajr, the 4 before dhuhr, the 2 after dhuhr, the 2 after maghrib, and the 2 after isha. Witr is going to be included in that category as well. So out of all of these salats that we're making outside of what is an obligation for us, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to here, right? That ordering the malaika, look to see if there is any nawafil. And if there is, this is where now that will be used for yukammala. So to do what? To takmil. Okay, so meaning that it is going to complete, meaning that the deficiency that exists, it is going to make up for that deficiency through the nawafil. And then in this matter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sa'iru amalihi ala dhalik, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as far as the zakat and the som and etc., Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to approach all of his actions in a likewise manner. Then an Jabir ibn Abdullah رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم مفتاح الجنة الصلاة ومفتاح الصلاة الوضوء. So Jabir radiallahu anh, he narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the key of Jannah is salah, and the key of salah is wudu. So what do we, what is it that we're supposed to take from here? Because we're talking about a crisis in the performance of the salah and consistency therein. Istiqama, which is also come from the root letters. Istiqama is the same thing, the same root letters that where Allah Ta'ala in that first ayah, wa aqimis salah, the root letters for aqimis salah, establish the salah. Those same root letters in Arabic are also in this word istiqama, meaning to be consistent, to be steadfast, right? So subhanallah. So now let's take a look at this salah. Unfortunately, especially for new Muslims, but this is pretty much across the board, there's this pervasive understanding in the Muslim community that the objective is performance of salah, meaning just the actual the mechanics of the salah itself. So go to the masjid, make sure you've got the mechanics of the wudu correctly, make sure you have the mechanics of the salah correctly, meaning like, do you know how to perform the salat externally in terms of like the motions, what you should say, etc. Do that correctly. And then that's it. Like, all right, done. So I'm making 5 times salat and that's the objective. Salah in and of itself is not the objective. What we have to understand about the salat, that the salat itself, it has in and of itself, it has a utility to it. Okay, that utility is going to serve multiple purposes, but we're going to address a couple of them today, inshallah. Number one, the utility of the salah is to mention those 2 ayat coming that we mentioned in the very beginning, inshallah, has to deal directly with the salat itself. Is supposed to prohibit us. It's supposed to prohibit us from vulgarity. It's supposed to prohibit us from doing those things which are outside of what we understand and what we know and understand is going to bring about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is supposed to be the result of the salah. So there's the salat itself is supposed to have an impact on our lives. It's supposed to be a tool that we are now incorporating in our day-to-day lives that is going to help us to achieve the purpose for which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, right? Hence, everything now, when you're looking at the salat, understand that in the salat, what's the whole point of the salat? The whole point of the salat is that you have to, it is about the submission in the salat. So when you're looking at the salat, can you look anywhere that you want to look? No. Can you say whatever you want to say? No. Even to the extent somebody comes into the masjid and they say assalamu alaikum, you can't do raddu salam. You can't return the salam. Why? Because you're in salat. Somebody sneezes and says alhamdulillah, you can't say yarhamukallah while you're in salah. You are supposed to be doing what? at that time of takbir al-ula, takbir al-tahrima, that's why it's called tahrim. Yani it makes everything else outside of the salah haram for you. We are supposed to be completely absorbed and lost in what? Allahu Akbar. This is creation. Everything outside of the salat is creation. Wife, kids, job, bills, that problem, this issue, whatever it is. All those things that are constantly assaulting our minds and our hearts, yani including yani the instigations and the yani shaitan trying to yani distract us away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of that, shaitan included, everybody and everything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supposed to be doing left behind. So this is the whole point. When we say Allahu Akbar, we have to actually mean it. Then when we're entering into the salah, how do we begin? We're making a dua, and we'll talk about the details of that in a different program, inshallah. But the first thing that we're doing is we're entering into what? Recitation of Quran, after doing what? Seeking refuge from shaitan, and then beginning in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then al-Fatiha, the first thing that we're starting with is the hamd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praising Allah. And then now this beautiful dua that exists in al-Fatiha, that now is a part of every rakat, every cycle in the salah. And then what do? We bow down in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you should understand this position not just in one of subservience, right, and submission to Allah, but also it's basically like, think of it this way, if it helps. Think of it as if you are now placing your neck in front of Allah, right? So like off with the heads type of thing, right? That's submissiveness. So we're placing our necks in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're bowing our heads. We're bowing our gaze in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now we are submitting in front of whom? The creator of the universe, that we just got done saying Allahu Akbar, right? Right from the very beginning. And we're repeating this over and over again, that this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Akbar, that we owe everything to Allah, and alhamdulillah, Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd, right? All of this, I know the translation is not there, but I get lost in translation. We'll take up everything. You should know this though. That's the whole point. Too many times, like as we're going through these, the salah, we don't even know what we're saying. We're just, again, it's about the mechanics, like robots. And that's where the difficulty is coming. If we're like throughout the salat, we're not understanding like what's actually happening here. Why am I saying what I'm saying? What is the meaning of it? Yani, what does it mean when I'm bowing before Allah in ruku? What does it mean when I prostrate in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said more or less the meaning. Yani, the closest the abd of Allah can get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life is where? It's in sajdah. Right? Hence, like you see that one of the things we're always saying, right? Success begins in sajda. Where does that come from? It comes from this understanding that is presented in front of us by Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also when you hear the adhan, what are we saying? Again, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Then we're doing what? We're testifying. And for us, the sami', the one who is listening, the sunnah is to do what? Repeat what the muadhin is saying. Right? So it's not just him saying it. We also are taking a part in this as well. So we're bearing testimony in the court of Allah. What is the truth? What is reality? Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And then what happens? Hayya ala salah. Come to the salah. It's a come to the salah. Why? Because hayya ala al-falah. Because that's where ultimately your success lies. And the thinking here is that, well, I make the salah and that's the success. No. That's not the success. The success comes when now you are completely, again, with this khushu', right? With this humble submissiveness, this fear, this in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that now we are presenting ourselves in front of the creator of the universe, that we are humbling ourselves in front of the creator of the universe, and now we are bringing our entirety of our existence, at least in that moment, or making a sincere attempt at it, right? That everything other than Allah should be removed from our hearts and from our minds. That's the struggle. Learning the mechanics, that's just the beginning. Get done with that as soon as possible. Make sure that you learn it correctly, but that's the beginning. And, if the person dedicates himself, literally you can learn it in a day, right? You can learn that in a day. But this, what we're talking about right here, this is something that you're talking about. It's a lifetime effort. And this is one of the big problems, especially with converts and people who are returning to deen. They think that just making salat is the objective. No, salat is the tool. What we want to do is now inside of the salat and outside of the salat, we're supposed to be applying ourselves as far as what? These esoteric or these internal aspects of our deen. Yani removing ghayrullah, anything other than Allah has to be cleaned from our hearts. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about this process of tazkiyatul qalb or tazkiyatul nafs, right? Purification of the heart, purification of the self, purification of what? All that drama and all those issues that ultimately end up acting as barriers between us and the performance of the salat. Because the salat itself, and again, I says it's an indication of what? If we are having problems making salat 5 times a day, just the number, okay? Forget about like the quality. If we just the quantity itself, it's because of what? Outside of the salat, there are major issues. There's a pollution, contamination in the heart. There's a lack of understanding. So basically, it's the same two culprits: ignorance and arrogance. Ignorance and arrogance. And if the person, like, it's one thing if it's ignorance. If the arrogance is removed, right, then it's a matter of ignorance. And now that person hopefully has that humility to where they will actually engage in this process of reform, engage in this process of rectification wholeheartedly, so that way, again, their lives come into conformance with the orders of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then now, mashallah, with this effort outside of the salat, you will find that performance of the salat becomes easier. Then we exert ourselves inside of the salat as well. What does that do? Now we see the impact of that exertion outside, that ijtihad, right? That exertion. We see the impact of that exertion outside of the salat. So it's kind of a paradox of these two things, that, you know, you want to fix your salat, you got to fix what's happening outside of the salat. And if you want to fix what's happening outside of the salat, then you have to fix the salat itself. Okay. But ultimately, if it's saying that, like, I can't even make salat, like I can't even get this in 5 times a day, that's letting you know, because the first question, chicken or the egg, which one comes first? There's your answer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that you're not even in a position outside of the salat yet. You're not even meeting a bare minimum prerequisite outside of the salat in order to be engaged in salat 5 times a day. You have major issues. There are serious sicknesses. And we're not talking about like the common cold. We're talking about cancers. We are cancers that are spiritual cancers that are residing in the heart, that if they are not dealt with, yani, they ultimately could lead to our destruction. May Allah Ta'ala protect us and Iman al-Hafiz. Right? But if we can't even like access the tool itself, and we're not able to get the benefit from the salah itself, at least on the most basic of levels, then Allah Ta'ala is saying, look, this is an indication. You are not being granted tawfiq. You are not being granted the ability to perform the salah. Why? There's something horribly wrong with you. And if you do not submit and seek out professional help, basically, right? Same thing like cancer. Like, what do you need? Orange juice. No, it's not the common cold, right? You need to go not even see your normal doctor. You need to go see a specialist. You need to go see somebody that specifically deals with cancer. The same thing here, when we have these sicknesses, these cancers that reside in our heart, it's not something that you're going to be able to generally tackle on your own. Illa mashallah. Except as Allah wills. Allah Ta'ala is Allah Ta'ala is not dependent upon any sabab, any means. But at the same time, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is the one who created this system. So if Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala wanted to purify the Sahaba, He could have just did it without the need of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? If etc. There's so many different ways that we could apply this, but this is the system. So now what we need is, if I'm having difficulty performing the salat, if I'm having difficulty in engaging in these basic a'mal or works or actions, yani that are an obligation in my deen, it's an indication I need to seek professional help. And subhanallah, this is where a lot of things are falling apart in the lives of Muslims, is that probably won't like to hear it, but you know, it is what it is. Out of arrogance, and out of arrogance, and also out of just sheer distraction, ghafla, yani, which is a lack of taqwa. Ghafla means to be oblivious. It means to be heedless. not accepting the warnings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not paying attention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِذِكْرُ akbar. How do you, when you're engaged in the dhikr of Allah, and there's levels to that, when you're engaged in the dhikr of Allah and the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what? This is outside of ghafla. Dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leads to increase in taqwa. Salah itself is a form of dhikr. Recitation of Quran, utlu ma uhiya ilayka min al-kitab, right? Wa aqim salah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying what? Dhikr. Recite the Quran. Establish the salah. It is going to do what? Those issues that you have outside of the salah, it's going to help that. What we're saying to you now is that those issues outside of the salah are so severe. Right? The ghafla is so severe. The ignorance is so severe. The ego and the arrogance is so severe that now the access to this tool that Allah Ta'ala has made for us is not even at your disposal. So you have to seek professional help, meaning as in the title of the flyer that went out, it should be understood as, oh, it's a problem. No, it's a crisis. It is something that demands immediate attention and consistent attention, because to die like in this state is, again, it means that the person is not understanding. Two basic concepts here. Number one, that the salah itself is, it comes in a hadith more or less the meaning, it is the demarcation between iman and kufr. Where is that line drawn between a believer and a disbeliever? It is with this salah. So meaning that if I can't even make salah, meaning I'm that much closer to becoming a disbeliever, hence crisis. And then also when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during Laylatul Isra and Mi'raj, during the ascension of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was given this salah, this gift of salah by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How? Directly. The number was what? 50. Not 5, 50. And again, salah is an indication. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that 5 times salat is an obligation on you, it's for what? For Allah's benefit? No. Any aspect of our deen which is an obligation is an indication of the extreme need on our part. You need this. Allah is making it an obligation because you need it. So when we know I have to eat, I have to sleep, right? There's certain, I need shelter, I need clothing. We understand that there are essential needs for what? Survival. Okay? And we don't write those off. You know what? I just did the whole food thing. It's expensive, storage, there's refrigerators, like, it's just too much. I'm done with eating. I'll get to it next year. Right? I'm too busy right now. So, maybe next month I'll have some time. I'll have some time to eat. We don't do that. Maybe next month I'll have some time to sleep. Yeah, I'll get around to it when I can get around to it. Why? Because as soon as like those hunger pains are coming, as soon like we start, with a lack of sleep, we start suffering from sleep deprivation. Those are indications that what? No, this is serious. You need to address this need. So the same thing is happening here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that in terms of your survival, and then you're thriving in this dunya and ultimately achieving the purpose for which Allah Ta'ala has created you. And at a bare minimum, hopefully, inshallah, your najat, your salvation, you need this. And when we're saying that, no, I'm having difficulty performing salat 5 times a day. Okay, then you should feel pain. You shouldn't be like, okay with this. You should feel pain. You should feel restless. You should feel like, no, like what's going to happen to me? And the reason why that's absent is, again, not the arrogance here, it's the ignorance. Because you don't understand the importance of the salah. And if an individual doesn't understand the importance of the salah and the role of the salah and the necessity of the salah just for survival, and then moving on from just surviving to thriving, of course, it's going to be minimalized. And when we have placed other things as priorities in front of the pleasure of Allah, when we've made other things our priorities in life and our purpose in life, right? When we've become so distracted and disoriented, right, in our day-to-day lives, then this is something, again, that we should see as a crisis. It's something that we cannot be comfortable with. It's something that there should be a haka fi sadrik. You should have like this disturbance this feeling of irritation, of disturbance, right, in your heart, that no, something is going horribly wrong here. Because without the salat, that's an indication that I'm actually moving closer to kufr than I am, being being kafir, than I am being a believer. And that means that it's what little thing could possibly come, right, which is now going to potentially push us over the edge. May Allah Ta'ala protect our iman and the iman of our family and the iman of the believers of the here at Muslimun, the Muslims. So this is something that we have to take in consideration when we're looking at what's going on with me. What's going on is, number one, the proper understanding is absent, so that has to be developed first as a concept. So understanding salah correctly, conceptually, thoroughly. Then from there, now, mashallah, and that's okay if it's not an immediate thing. It's okay that it's a gradual process, as long as we got to get to the bare minimum here. We got to get to the bar. So like, if you're having difficulty in performing 5 times salat, and then on top of that you're trying to make your sunnah as well, it's okay in the beginning to just make the fard, right? Don't make it a habit. Don't even intend on like, I'm gonna, like, this is okay. Like, again, you should feel like it's just a stepping stone. So at bare minimum, first I got to get my fard down, because if I'm not taking care of the obligations, then why am I spending my time on what is nafil? Okay. So at least make those 2 rakats for Fajr, just the 4 for Dhuhr, just the 4 for Asr, 3 for Maghrib, 4 for Isha. Get to that starting point first. Why? Because at least now let's get out of this this region where we're gonna like classify this or characterize this as being a crisis. Then from there, once we've met this like bare minimal standard of what it means to be a Muslim, because again, don't forget, the importance is there, but then also the significance in terms of the understanding, the intensity of our need. But then there's also this aspect of it where when you're making salah, the issues of anxiety, depression, frustration, aggravation, all of these things which are causing turmoil in our lives, which are kind of like throwing us off balance. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the solution, the utility, right? This is how you use it. That Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah. Oh, you who believe, right? If you're a believer, what are you going to do? You are going to seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through what? Patience, right? Which is internal. And then there's the salah, where now you're taking that at internal, your taqwa, you're taking these internal, these esoteric aspects of the deen. And now with the mechanics, the external mechanics, you are now going to do what? Remove yourself from everything. Again, in the salah, Allahu Akbar. Problems, gone. Family gone, money gone, bills gone, past, present, future gone, everything gone. What is the only thing now? I have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in front of me. I have my who am I standing in front of? I'm standing in front of Allah. And I think it was Ali radiallahu anhu. He would make salah, and he said that when I'm making salah, I'm imagining that my grave, not the sajada, the janamaz, right? My grave is in front of me, and Jannah is on my right, and Jahannam is on my left. Think about this, right? And this is one of the crimes of what is taking place today, as far as all of these programs and this and that and the other, and arguments and discussions and forums about, like, should you raise your hands or not raise your hands, or your feet are touching or your feet are not touching. You say I mean out loud, or you don't say it out loud. This is a complete distraction from shaitan. All of that is permissible. All of that is found in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Follow one madhab that is based on a set of legal principles, stick with it, and focus on what? Get away from focusing on the mechanics. Why? Because there's so much work to be done internally. Our hearts need to be purified of everything other than Allah. Everything other than Allah is a veil between us and our Creator. And if we are looking at anything in this creation as a source of harm and benefit, that is shirk. If we are placing our hope or our fear or anything in creation, then that is shirk. That is joining partners with Allah. And most of the time when we look in the lives of individuals who are struggling with this, it is because of that. We have become distracted by our desires. We have we have placed our hopes and our fears in something other than Allah. We have now, in terms of where we hope to get benefit or harm, where we perceive benefit and harm for is coming from, we're looking at other than Allah. We're looking at the creation as opposed to the Creator. Yani, of course, we have difficulties in the salah, because outside of the salah, where is Allah? In our day-to-day lives, where is Allah? And if we're yani, Allahu Akbar, these struggles that we're feeling, and then it's like, now, yes, you're struggling to make salah, but what are you doing outside of the salah? But I don't want to change my lifestyle. Okay, there's the problem. There is no submission. There is no Islam, right? This istislam is missing. So when the submission is missing outside of the salah, then of course, how are you going to go into sajdah? And where does this really become scary? This becomes scary because this is also what takes place on Yom Al-Qiyamah. And on Yom Al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment, where people fall, yani before the judgment actually begins, right? There will be like, they fall in prostration in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are those that now, you didn't prostrate here, how are you going to prostrate there? You didn't prostrate here. You didn't submit here. How are you going to submit there? You didn't recognize Allah here. How are you going to recognize Allah there? So it's, again, we have to understand something. We have to devote our time and attention in regarding like the conditions of this life and the conditions of this world accordingly. Like, let the ratio. So how much time you're going to spend in this life, in your existence, okay, compared to how much time you're going to spend in the akhirah and that existence, based on that ratio, divide your lives up accordingly. And what's happening is we're thinking that this is life, this is my existence, and hence all the effort to do what? Satiate my desires. I want to indulge. I want what I want. I want what I like. I want to be treated a particular way. We see this I, which is nafs. It is the ego. I want. And technically, the Satanists, they use this as their definition. Who's a Satanist? They have one law: do as thou wilt, and let that be the whole of the law. Yani, do whatever you want to. That's the only law. Nobody can tell you what's good for you. Nobody can tell you what's bad for you. Nobody can tell you about what's, what you should do or what you shouldn't do. You do whatever you want to do. You know best about you. Nobody knows what you've experienced and what goes on in your head and your heart. So yeah, go do what you want to do. And is this not what is exactly happening? This is known as ibadatu shaitan. Worshipping shaitan, obeying shaitan. It's not something like you're going to get down and, you got to put some goat's horns on your head or something like that and dress all in black and prostrate in front of an idol of shaitan or nothing. No, it happens like this. It happens like this, that we become so fixated, right, on indulgence, convenience, satiation of our desires, trying to make this life and this world like our Jannah, right? This laziness and apathy, overall apathy, right? That goes along with that overall, that cancer that ends up leading ultimately to self-destruction. And what is it? It's self-sabotage. Self-sabotage leads to self-destruction. What leads to the self-sabotage? Self-obsession. And that's what we see in this, at least in this country. Everybody now is at everybody else's throats. Why? Because this understanding of altruism, this understanding of being selfless with this dunya, selfish with your akhirah, has now become absent from the hearts and minds of human beings. That's what's going on. And we are following them in everything. And thus, these basic elements, these basic aspects of what it means to be a Muslim. As soon as you take your shahada, what's the first thing that's an obligation on you? You got to make salah. First thing you got to do is learn how to make salah. And as I said in the ayah, in the hadith of Nabi alayhi salatu salam, the key to Jannah is salah. The key to salah is wudu. So that's the reason why we begin with kitab al-tahara. Why? Because you got to learn how to make wudu first, then immediately learn how to make salah. Because it's an expression of gratitude. It is an expression of gratitude. Be grateful. Allah made you Muslim and you didn't deserve it. There's not a single one of us. It's not even possible that you're going to be able to look at your life and say, I deserved my Islam. Allah had to give me Islam. I deserved it. Who's arrogant enough to, I hope nobody, none of us are arrogant enough to even think it, much less articulate it and say it. So what's the first thing that we are responsible for? Express your submissiveness. Express your gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately. It's the first thing that you have to learn how to do. Right? And this is where now that conformity is going to come into place. So hence, hopefully, if the person is taking their shahada and they're sincere, then when they are now inside of the salah, they're learning what? They're learning how they should be outside of the salah. What's happened is that we as Muslims, that the question is are we really sincere with the first step? When we're taking that shahada multiple times during the day and we're professing with our tongues to be Muslims, are we sincere? That's the issue. The issue is sincerity. The opposite of sincerity, ikhlas, in Islam is nifaq, to be a hypocrite. A hypocrite is what? You professed, yani you're saying that you believe one thing, but then your actions are indicating something different. And we're talking about nifaq, yani amalan, meaning that there's one thing is a nifaq, yani haqiqatan. That means that now it's like an infiltrator, right? The person is, they know they're lying right from the very beginning. They're just lying. They're saying that they're Muslim so they can infiltrate the Muslim community to do whatever harm that they intend on doing. Okay, that's a different thing. There's for these, this is the worst type, the worst category of humanity. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about nifaq is that yes, we're saying yani that we believe in Allah, we believe in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're testifying to this fact in the court of Allah, in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but then our actions are completely contradictory to what we're saying. And that is nifaq amali. And what it indicates is that there is a issue with sincerity. And there's an issue with sincerity, meaning that there's something horribly wrong. There's a cancer exists in the heart. And if yani, the same way, like if if a cancer exists, again, you go to a specialist. And that's ultimately is what is needed during this day, during this age, is we need specialists. We need professional spiritual help in order to overcome this. Because again, with social media, and well, let's just call it the internet, right? The net and the web, appropriately named. It's designed, right? What is it? Social dilemma, right? It's a whole group, it's a whole forum, and these people with this social dilemma, what's the social dilemma? These are now, when you have the people in the industry, right, in the tech industry, in a lot of ways you could say in the whether it's the apps, the technology, the software, everything that you have become accustomed to in the techie world today, like these are the forefathers. Like these are the ones that established the industry and what has now become a normative aspect of today's society. When they are saying we did not intend this and we didn't want this, and now they themselves are standing up to say, no, there's something horribly wrong. It's destroying us. And they're even getting, like, they're saying this. It's not us. They're saying, like, really? Unless there is a collective willful effort, yani an intentional and conscious effort to shut this stuff down and promote and bring about change, we are doomed. They are saying this. Now, anybody who's paying attention, like even halfway paying attention, is going to see this like, yeah, that's obvious. Look at us. We're going at it like everybody's going at each other's throats as it stands right now. The suicide rate of teens, especially young girls, and anxiety and depression has skyrocketed in the last 10 years. Skyrocketed. And it is moving so fast in the wrong direction. Families are being broken, marriages are being broken, relationships are being broken, society is being broken, and that's just from a dunyawi sense. What is happening to us as believers, yani we profess we're claiming to be believers. What's happening to us and what we're seeing happening to us is identical what's happening to them. And I'm telling you, these are the things that people like myself that we are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, not just in the community. We also are dealing with it in our own families. We're not immune. We are the same way that these guys, they're like, that they themselves are saying, like, we're struggling and we're having to consciously battle within our own families to keep our families away from the things that we invented. We fabricated this stuff. We brought it into the world, right? And we ourselves can't keep our own family members away from it. We ourselves are struggling ourselves individually. And the same thing is happening. Do not think that like people like myself are immune to this as well. We live in the same society. We are also being, potentially, we are being influenced by the same things that you are. So if we are not now going to, when this thing is being designed to do what? Intentionally pull us into a state of what? Indulgence and distraction. The whole point, the whole point of the distraction is in a lot of ways, like AI is already artificial intelligence. People worried about it in the future. It's already happened. It's happening right now. The algorithms and everything that run, right? They run on their own. It's kind of like they wound it up, okay, and they let it go. And now the thing is learning on its own. And there are literally acreage, okay? There are acres and acres and acres of computers that are underground, they're underwater, subhanAllah, underwater. There are acres of these computers, and this is all that it does. This is all that it does, is figure out what is it watches you, it keeps an eye on you, and it figures out how to distract you, how to get you to enter into this and remain in a state of ghafla. And even to the extent of doing what? It triggering literally chemical reactions in the brain, in the pleasure centers of the brain, right? Dopamine and etc., so on and so forth, right? SubhanAllah. And we have become addicts. And there is a very interesting thing. The term users, okay, is only used in relation to two particular things: drug addicts and tech. Think about that. So what is the issue? Insincerity, heedlessness, ignorance, arrogance, and each and every one of these is a cancer in and of itself. So imagine like somebody saying, like showing up in front of you and saying, like, I've got 4 different types of cancer, or cancer is spread to 4 different, systems of my body. Right, it's in my lungs, and may Allah protect our health. It's in my lungs, and it's in my bone marrow, and it's in this and this and that. How would you look at that individual? Be kind of like, SubhanAllah, wouldn't want to be you, right? We will be doing your janazah soon, and that's their physical health, and we're talking about their mortality. What is it that we're expecting here? We have these cancers, multiple cancers. We have this extreme sickness that is now not is in and of itself is being ignored and being excused, right? Oh no, it's because of this or it's because of that. It's being delayed. I'll deal with it later. I just don't have time. I know it's important, but as if like there's a guarantee that forget tomorrow, forget like a week from now, like literally from night to day, day to night, night to day, day to night. We don't have a guarantee. There's any number of ways that you and I could have possibly died today. And the same will be true about tomorrow and the next day, and so on and so forth. Right? This sense of security, or this sense that we are guaranteed a certain amount of life, is proven in front of us to be false every day. Every day, baby, people of all ages, from all different nationalities, backgrounds, social economic statuses, education levels, different professions, they're dying every day around us. Literally, like this thing is like something like over 150,000 people every day. Now think about that. And our time is coming. And we know it to be inevitable. Yani in terms of knowledge wise, okay, I don't think I've ever run into somebody that says, that I don't believe I'm ever going to die. I'm immortal. I don't care what they profess to believe. When it comes to death, this is one of those things that, you know, it's such a reality in day-to-day life, an escapable reality, that there is actually a conscious effort. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about death. Don't mention death. I don't want to be around death. Like, let's make a joke out of it. Death is a joke. Let's make a joke, right? We'll do some movies and this and that and the other, and we'll joke about death. Let's turn shaitan into a joke too. We can joke about that. We can do TVs, movies, etc. Let's turn the whole thing into a joke, so that way we can passively keep on going with the lifestyle that we have been living, and then one that now conforms to what I want. What I want, not what Allah wants. So of course there's a problem. This is the issue. The problem with the salah is a symptom. And this is what now, with Islam of mine and all of our efforts, we're hoping and praying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us with these extreme difficulties, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use us also, that we create an environment and an atmosphere that is welcoming, it is safe, but it is an environment and an atmosphere which is conducive for our overall health, physical, spiritual, mental health. Yani, Islam is holistic. It's a package deal. Hence, al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati, right? Wa raditu lakum. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, today, deen has been made what? Our way of life has been made perfect and complete. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this is the lifestyle that pleases him. This is what Allah ta'ala has chosen for us. It's a package deal. If you add something to it, it becomes imperfect. If you take something away from it, it becomes imperfect. All right? It's a package deal. Islam has to be understood holistically, not piecemeal, not in segments, right? You can't compartmentalize Islam. You have to understand it holistically. And that understanding is something which has to be developed, and it has to be developed through what? Part of it, yes, it happens in a classroom. It happens through, like, you know, modes and methods that we're like we're doing right now, what we're using, incorporating right now. But more importantly, it is something which is experiential. Yani, it is the process of applying this deen in our day-to-day lives, going through that process of refinement, going through that process of rectification, moving from what I want to what Allah wants, right? Moving from ghafla to taqwa, from this kufr, meaning like not just disbelief, but ingratitude to Allah, to shukr and hamd, and in the expressing our gratitude and our appreciation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what we don't deserve. Now you will understand this is why the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, what did they talk about? Like, for us, we talk about, I hate it when people come up to me and they're like, they ask about, my dunya, right? Before people will come, so what do you do for a living? You haven't even asked my name yet, and you want to know what I do for a living, as if like that's some like important thing. When I was younger, I used to, it was for a short period of time, I used to be a garbage man. So sometimes I throw that out there just to see the look on their faces. Well, I used to like be on the back of a garbage truck and tip the garbage cans, right? Why? Because that's what's you're trying to understand my social status. I don't have any value for it. So fine, I'm completely okay with being a garbage man in your eyes, because go on about your business, right? Kayfa haluk, what's your hal? We think our condition is in relation to this dunya. Kayfa haluk is about what is your hal, what is your condition with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Kayfa imanuk, how is your iman, what is the condition of your iman? That is exactly what the Sahaba would be asking each other. That's exactly what we should be asking each other. That's what we should be promoting with each other, encouraging one another. Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum, they used to do what? They used to talk about what you and I would know as aqeedah. They used to talk about truth and reality. They would talk about death, the reality of death, what happens in the grave, what will happen on the day of judgment. They would talk about Jannah, Jahannam, the reality of this dunya, right? Getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, love for Allah, love for his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the things that they preoccupied themselves with. These are the things that their families used to preoccupy themselves with. So there was a support network that was understood as ummah. Why don't we have ummah today? Why is it that now a lot of times Muslims are actually harder on each other than they are on non-Muslims? Which is again, Muhammadur Rasulullah walladhina ma'ahu ashiddu 'ala al-kuffari ruhama'u bainahum. And then Surah Al-Fath, right? At the very end, Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And those who are with them, they're what? They're more intense and severe on the kuffar. But between themselves, yani they are merciful. Ruhama. They're ruhama. It's the exact opposite. And understand, and I'll end with this. When we start talking about opposites, ghafla, taqwa, right? Being merciful to the kuffar, and then being harsh and severe and strict and critical and judgmental of the believers of Muslims. When we start talking about iman and kufr, we start talking about gratitude and ingratitude, and we start talking about how we're on the opposite end of things and the efforts that are being made to pull us in that direction away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My beloved brothers, sisters, please understand this deception is the whole point. This system is the whole point and what leads to the coming of Dajjal. This is the point. We are in a time where even like quote unquote reporters have their own agendas. Truth? What is truth anymore? Truth has been like turned into something which is completely subjective, and you got your truth and I got mine. You got your viewpoints and I got mine. And now it's all about doing what? Just subhanAllah. You take your way, I take my way, and we're okay with that actually. We're okay with that. As long as we're on the right side of things. Meaning that there's iman and there's everything else. There's sincerity and then there's everything else. There's taqwa and then there's everything else. Lakum dinukum waliya din. This surah, Surah Al-Kafirun, unfortunately for a lot of us today, it's not true. There's very little, if any, distinction between the way that we are living and the way that they are living, except for what we are basically professing with our tongues and a minimal amount of action. And then there's issues with those actions in terms of their exoteric as well as their esoteric qualities, right? So this is something that all of us have to understand, that we have to bring to the forefront of our minds. It is an absolute necessity. It is a need. It is a cancer that has to be addressed. And if not, what is going to happen to our children? What is going to happen to the generations to come? We have a responsibility in this dunya to represent Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to prepare an atmosphere and environment for our children, which is going to be conducive for our children getting close to Allah, for them being successful, as well as the generations to come. And we have a responsibility and a loyalty that needs to be expressed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a gratitude that needs to be expressed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a sincerity that needs to be expressed in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where now, mashallah, you and I, we have got to come together in this effort, right? In this effort of purification, in this effort of supporting each other, in this effort of becoming ruhama'u bainahum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for all of us to engage in this process of reform and change. May Allah ta'ala soften our hearts. If there is any barriers, any arrogance, anything that is stopping us from getting close to Allah, Ya Allah, we beg you to remove these barriers and to make it easy for us. Allahumma la sahla innama ja'altuhu sahla wa anta taj'alu hazana idha shitta sahla. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا يا كريم. سبحان الله بحمده سبحانك اللهم بحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Technically our time is done right now. I think we've got like a few seconds left. So if anybody needs to leave, but I do want to make sure that I am available. If you have any specific questions, please feel free, inshallah. You can use this time, inshallah, if you want to ask something more specific about the salat, the process, etc. I am here at your service, inshallah. MashaAllah. Barakallahu fikum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you. Again, join us. All right. And when I say us, it's not just Islam of mine. right? This is a collection of what you would know as organizations, but we just see ourselves as Muslims. Organizations, like in terms of like, IRS and this and that and the other, and understanding like the difference between this and that. But it's trust me, it's not just us. This need is something that is understood and being recognized, right, on a large scale. And there are a lot of efforts, and things are tightening up because there's an understanding that is almost inescapable now. And there are even ones who are kind of like on the fence are now hopping off that fence on the side of the understanding, like it's going to get way worse before it gets better. It's going to get way worse before it gets better. And when we talk about better, better will likely not be in our lifetime. That's how severe things are, internally, externally, pretty much in every phase of human, like every aspect of human existence, socially, economically, politically, like you name it, in our families, individually, external, internal, whatever it is. It's going to get worse before it gets better, and better will not likely happen in our lifetime. So please, inshallah, we need each other. We need each other. We are supposed to be an ummah. We should be, we should be a cohesive unit, and we should recognize and appreciate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it that way, that Allah doesn't have us just be alone. Don't be alone and try to fight this battle by yourself. Come join us, get that professional help and attention that you need to get better, to get healthy, so that you can reach your full potential as a human being, as a Muslim, as the abd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Improve the overall quality of your existence. Use this life to define your existence in the akhirah, because that is what is going to happen in one way or the other. So take the time, take the effort, make a conscious effort to get close to Allah, so that how you define yourself and how you are defined at the time of death, and how you will be defined on Yawm al-Qiyamah, is mashallah something that you and I in our minds, that mashallah we can be honored with, right? That we can feel a sense of, yes, accomplishment, true accomplishment. والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون ثلة من الأولين قليل من الآخرين. Allah Ta'ala talks about those, the sabiqun, those people who race ahead to the forefront, right? Those people that they are like, mashallah, they're this ijtihad, they're exerting themselves and they're racing to the forefront. And mashallah, Allah Ta'ala says in their early generations, right, in the beginning, a third of them, they're like this. But from amongst the ending generations, قَلِيلٌ مِّنَ الْآخِرِينَ, very few. May Allah make us from amongst those few. Jazakumullah khairan jaza. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.